I was convinced that I would do that for the rest of my life. When I got put on this rather large project, very tight deadlines, very quickly I realized that I was
G'day everyone, welcome to Simpa Says. Rishi, welcome to the show.
great to be here, Jordan, and good to see you after some time.
Yeah, it's been a while, mate. It's been a while. So, as I always do on this show, just a quick look in your LinkedIn profile. You are currently a co-pilot behavioral specialist at Microsoft, but we're not going to start there. We might get there eventually. I'm going to take you back to when you were a child or maybe a teenager. Tell me about the first time you probably thought to yourself, this is something I would like to do, that sort of kicked off your initial career thoughts. What was it? And what age were you? What were you thinking?
Great question, mate. I think probably around year 9, 10, when I sort of started to get a bit of an idea. But I guess just before that, I got introduced to GW Basic as part of our computer classes. And so I really enjoyed putting some code together. And there was relatively simple code, but I really enjoyed trying to solve simple problems. And then in our year 10 project, our school library was looking for a better software system to manage people checking in, checking out books. So as part of a project, we ended up taking on developing the school's library software using GW Basic. And I think that was my first experience into what it would mean to be a technology professional and actually work with code for a living. We loved putting the software together for the library, and the school ended up actually using it for a few years after we left school as well. So I think it was probably around year 10 that I realized that moving from GW Basic to Visual Basic, that this is something that I really wanted to do and something that I really enjoyed doing, and I wasn't too bad at.
Okay. Cool. So that's actually a pretty good story. I've never heard of someone saying, "Oh, this is actually a pretty good opportunity to actually kick something off." Basic was a cool language to start off, so it's cool to hear you actually kicked off there. So did that then give you the inspiration to look at that from a career perspective? Because if I look at your education, and my goodness, mate, you've got a lot of education, which is cool to see. I love that, the always learning thing, right? So you, I guess, was your first, degree or bachelor was at Brisbane Queensland University of Technology, where you did a Bachelor of IT. So was that the driver from a further education perspective to sort of create a career in IT? Was that sort of what you were thinking from then on?
Yeah, so this experience that I had at school was a major contributor. So in year 11 and 12, I had really good computer science teachers, and they were really able to help me think about how do you work like a coder. And I really appreciated that systematic step-by-step thinking. And so that inspired me to go and do information technology at university at QUT up in Brisbane. And then I suddenly realized that coding wasn't what I thought it would be, because at school I had exposure to one language, and it was a very simple sequential language. And we started to delve into the deeper object-oriented world when I was at university. So I got a much wider appreciation for the coding world and what it meant to be a software developer. In my final year of university, we actually had a really cool project where we tried to code all of cricket into a software. And so that would give people the ability to actually record everything that was happening on a cricket field in a software, and in real time get stats on the bowling performances of a particular bowler against a batter. And it did data mining at the same time. And so that was our first real experience on how do you come up with a software that's commercially sort of acceptable. And so we had a team of 4 or 5 people as part of our final year project. And we had a really good professor guiding us on how to think like a professional coder. And we actually ended up putting some software together that we actually went to one of the TV stations at the time.
Oh, that's cool.
That used to broadcast cricket, and we actually pitched it to them, and we got really good feedback from them. And so I guess understanding from school what software engineering was all about and what coding was all about was fascinating. But then at university, when you take that knowledge, put it into a higher education perspective, and actually end up doing that's commercially an opportunity, that's when you really decide that is software engineering for you or not. And at that time, I decided that I wanted to be a software developer. And yeah, coding was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So was that, if I look at your profile, the first job, I guess, that's listed on there was project manager and web developer at Business City Council. Was that your first, I guess, real gig, as we sort of say, full-time job, not necessarily like, I think I was a waiter for 5 weeks when I was at uni, and I was a terrible waiter, but that was never a real job. Was that your first, proper full-time job in IT?
So that was a part-time job I was doing while I was finishing off university. So once again, with software, as you know, right, it's all about hands-on. And so given that we had a few bits of code that we had created during the university years, I was able to go and see if I could actually put that into practice. And I went to the Brisbane City Council, who had a job advertised. And I said, well, I can do this part-time because I'm still studying. And given that I was a student, they were happy to have me at a significantly reduced rate. And so it was a win-win situation because I could put into practice what I was learning at university
Yeah.
while I was working for a real organization. And I was getting feedback on what worked in reality and what was great in theory, but that's not how you would go about implementing it in real life. So I guess people that I'm mentoring today, that's the first bit of guidance I give them is if there's an opportunity for you to put into practice whatever you are learning, even though you're not in a job in that area, right? But try and create, craft, and manufacture an opportunity to put into practice whatever you're learning. The learning experience is so much richer. And I guess that's an opportunity I had working at the Brisbane City Council at the time. But the real first job I had was moving to Canberra from Brisbane as a graduate intake at Centrelink, where I was actually hired as a software developer doing some of the BI work and then some of the Java coding.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a common for anyone watching this outside of Australia. Centrelink seems to be a common employer for anyone in the Canberra region or the Canberra area. A very, very big employer around there. So we do find a lot of people work there. That's cool. So essentially, you went and created your own internship that gave you that opportunity, right? That's awesome.
That's right.
I've never heard of someone literally creating their own internship. I think that's great guidance for anyone listening to this, saying, "Oh, I haven't got an opportunity." Go out and create your opportunity. That's brilliant. That's really great to hear. So, do you feel that the experience that you got working, not just the education part, really helped in landing that role at Centrelink?
Most definitely. I think that was one of the biggest experiences when it comes to preparing for an interview. Because what I found, and this is the feedback that I got from that interview process afterwards, is that I wasn't talking about theory. I was talking about my actual experience. And that's something that I take into every interview I go, is I talk about the actual experience that I've had working in a position, succeeding or failing. And what I was able to talk to during my first real job interview at Centrelink, which is a federal government department within Canberra, was the challenges of implementing the theory that I'd learned into real life, when it worked and when it didn't work. And I think what probably went in my favor at that time is that I was able to articulate what didn't work. And I was able to take that feedback and apply my work differently to the situation. So, yeah, 100%, if you're able to put into practice what you're learning and take feedback from that experience, that goes a long way into being able to demonstrate that you can learn from both opportunities but also challenges during interviews.
That's really good advice. So take me through your thought process about your career at that point. So obviously we know that you really were inspired when you had that opportunity at high school, decided you wanted to be a software developer, got that opportunity at university, and you've had quite a few. And I know you personally since you've worked at Microsoft, but looking at your career, what sort of drove the next steps in you? What were you thinking? Are you a person who plans 5-10 years in advance with your career and says to yourself, I want to achieve this? Or was it something lifestyle that helped you decide what was the next step after software developer? Take me through that thought process, what your next steps were once you moved from software development to another type of role.
George, to be honest, at that point when I first started as a full-time software developer, I was convinced that I would do that for the rest of my life until about 6 months into that role, or probably about 9 months into that role, when I got put on this rather large project. And we had a significant team, about 20-30 odd people working on some code, very tight deadlines. And I saw the complexity of what we had to do. And very quickly, I realized that I was way out of my depth. And I tried to put my learning mindset on to say, okay, now I need to learn, how do I bridge the gap from where I am as a software developer to where I need to be effective in that project. And at that stage, I realized that I didn't have a clear path, and getting some coaching wasn't helping me develop that clear path. And during that process, what I started to realize that I was gravitating more towards my people my person aspect and reflecting on who I want to be as a person, what kind of work that I like doing, and who do I like to work with more than thinking about software and engineering. And so that was a really interesting pivot point for me because I realized that, yes, even though software engineering was my passion until that time, that there were other areas that I spent a lot more time thinking about. And it was the people that I was working with, what their interests were, how do I make them successful? And so an opportunity came up in the support world within the same organization. And they were looking for a change manager to manage IT infrastructure change within a very large and complex environment. And so I said, great, this is a really good way for me to look at both the technical aspects of the change, but also look at working with a lot of stakeholders and working with stakeholders to make them successful at being able to land their changes within their organization. So I jumped from being a software developer into a very unknown, very uncomfortable space for me, which was the world of IT service management as a change manager. And I had some prior experience in managing code releases. And so I took that experience into this new role, and I found that I really, really loved it. And that my real passion wasn't working with code as much as it was working with people. And so what I thought I had as a career plan and a definite career trajectory got turned completely upside down. And I was introduced to the world of IT service management.
What was the next steps for you from a career perspective and from a learning perspective?
So, George, one thing I realized is when you're earlier on in your career, really the world's your oyster and you only know what you know. And coming up with a 5-year plan when you only know what you know can potentially be limiting. And so at that point in my career, I feel really happy that I didn't have a 5-year plan. I had a trajectory and a path, and I thought I would stick there, but I wasn't limited by having pre-existing steps that I was following. And so being able to transition from the software engineer role to something completely outside, which was more operational, wasn't as difficult for me. I did have to learn the IT service management world. And so this is where having an awesome manager makes the world of a difference, especially when you're early in your career. I had a conversation with my manager about how I wanted to transition from a software engineer into potentially this new role. And my manager coached me through it. She helped me prepare for the interviews. She sent me on courses that I needed to go. So I did the ITIL Foundations course at that time. And that gave me enough information to be able to sit through the interview. But then once I had moved into that role, I moved to another really awesome manager. And so the new manager actually helped me build a development plan on where I was, where I needed to be successful in that role, but then also what I really wanted to do. And I didn't give away all of my software engineering passion. I still wanted to create software. And so my manager was more than accommodating and providing opportunity to say, okay, Rishi, this is where you can continue to learn to be successful in this new role. But these are all the other projects that you can continue to work on where you get to develop software. And I think working with your manager, where you have the opportunity to have a supportive manager, is really important because now it becomes a partnership. At that time, I didn't feel like I was working for my manager. It was like the manager and I were working together into making me successful in my role, and then me helping my manager be successful in what they were there to drive for the team. So, I went and did a whole bunch of ITIL advanced courses. I became an ITIL master, and from that, I started to venture into the more complex coordination, and then moved through a number of different government organizations doing more change and release management type of guidance.
Oh, that's cool. It's actually really good that you were supported through that process. So that obviously gave you a lot of the experience you needed, which then likely, I'm assuming, helped you move to the Department of Immigration and Citizenship, which is another government agency in Canberra. Was that a similar type of role? I'm looking through just all the different types of roles. It does sound like a lot of change management, configuration management, deployment dependency. And I'm assuming with a slight differences when you move from role to role, obviously, but still the similar skills. If we look at your career at that point, obviously you sort of kept going down that path for a couple of years. I then worked at the ASG group for a year and then at Dowling service management, business process consultant, building your skills, building your resume. Did you have a were you just looking to continue to build your skills in that area and then continue to look at other opportunities with other companies at that point? Like, were you still thinking, I'm just enjoying my job, I'm going to continue to build on what I'm doing and then just see how things go?
So, George, I think at that time, I wanted to be really good at my job.
Okay.
I wanted to build my skills to that of an expert. And that's an opportunity I got with Department of Immigration. Is I was the enterprise configuration manager for the whole department. And at that time, we were coming up with a strategy and a tool to help manage the configuration management capability of the department. And given that I was a senior lead on that project, I was given the opportunity to think outside the box and craft a solution. And I guess as you mature in your career, what I really valued was collecting experiences, right? Because it's the application of the experiences that is the difference, in my opinion, between knowledge and wisdom. And so getting an experience of how something would work and then applying that in a different context to see if this experience would apply in this context, or how do you tweak this experience so it works in this context. That's practically what I was looking to do. So everything I had learned about change and release management and incident and problem and all the different service management processes, I took that at immigration and I tried to apply that within the configuration management context. And we ended up coming up with probably the first configuration management in government that worked on trust. It was an open contribution model instead of a fixed controlled update model. And it worked really, really well. And that's the first time I had seen anything like that actually in play. And so what I really appreciated from that experience is that you don't always have to do things the way the book explains. Sometimes the culture of the organization that you're working for gives you the opportunity and lets you take liberties outside of what the book considers best practice. And so that was a new experience for me. And I really valued that experience. And I wanted to get more of those experiences where I got to do things outside of what the book says is best practice. And so that's why I moved into consulting. So that way I could work with many different organizations and I got to experiment working with them around what was the best way to get something done in their way, with their people, within their environment, within their cultural subcontext. And so that experimentation across lots of different organizations gave me a collection of experiences. And that's exactly what I was looking to collect. Okay. Those experiences. And so thinking about moving from just doing my job and being very good at it, now I started to think about, well, how do I collect a variety of experiences? And then how do I coach other people based on that experience? And I think that wasn't something that was planned for me. It just so turned out that my career took me in that direction.
So was that potentially where, and looking at your career, you got to a point in, obviously, and again, this is obviously where you and I met as well. You had the opportunity to join Microsoft after Dowling in 2012. In your mind, was that something that was planned or just an opportunity that came to play? Was that the main driver for you, or was Microsoft a childhood dream or something you'd always aimed to do?
Actually, George, it's a funny story here. I never wanted to work for Microsoft. I got approached by a recruitment organization a couple of times from Microsoft, and I turned them down to say, sorry, not interested in working for Microsoft. I was really enjoying the collection of experiences, and I wasn't quite sure how Microsoft would help with that. However, one bit of advice I got given from a friend is, Rishi, just go there for interview practice. Because it's been a while since you interviewed. And Microsoft is known for their very robust interview practices. So go for that experience, collect that experience. And so it just so happened that at that time, I was working across the road from the Microsoft office in Canberra. And so during my lunch breaks, I would go there across the road, go for my interviews and come back. And so I had no intention of working for Microsoft. I ended up taking a pay cut to move to Microsoft just because the interview experience really intrigued me. It wasn't the questions, it was the people who interviewed me. And during the interviews, I wanted to make sure, obviously they wanted to make sure that I was the right person for the role, but I also wanted to make sure that Microsoft was the right company for me. So instead of having those 3 interview questions at the end, I had like 10 interview questions at the end for each of the interviews. And if people were like, sorry, we only have an hour, I said, sorry, I've got more questions. right? So I would actually ask them to stay back as much as they could to answer the questions that I had. And at the end of the interview process, there was I think about 5 interviews all up. I was fascinated by the people that worked at Microsoft and people that I got to interact with during the interviews. And that was the decision making driver for me, is to go and work with those really smart people that would help me challenge my thinking. Microsoft as a brand, I did not know enough about to want to go and work for them.
It's a common theme actually here from people who've worked at Microsoft. The people are a big reason why they want to work for Microsoft. I've heard that quite a few times now, actually. All right, so you're in Microsoft. You're there. Tell me sort of the next part of it, because I know you, from memory, and if I'm not mistaken, you did actually, and you did. You went to Singapore a couple of years into the role. Take me through what was that decision? Was that another, you know what, I just want the experience of working in a different country, or was there another reason behind wanting to move there? And then as a secondary question, once you've answered that one, tell me about some of the challenges that you found moving to another country and then how you sort of overcame those.
So about a year and a bit before moving to Singapore, I had an opportunity to do a course. Then once again, my manager at the time encouraged me to go and explore. And this is where I've got to say, having a good manager makes the world of a difference, because sometimes you don't know what you need and you need somebody else to give you a nudge. And at that point, I was very happy in the IT service management world. I was doing a lot of consulting for organizations around Asia. And my manager at the time said, "Hey, Rishi, consider change management from a people perspective. And so how about you go and do a ProSci change management practitioner course and see what it's like managing change for people and how do you guide them through change?" And those 3 days completely blew me away, because I realized that people are just as important part of the puzzle as technology when it comes to making change in a technical environment. And I started on my journey at UNSW, University of New South Wales, doing some higher education studies on change management in parallel. And so when the opportunity came where Microsoft was setting up an incubation team worldwide, so a team of 11 worldwide, and they needed somebody based out of Singapore, I had a quick conversation with my family to say, well, this is an opportunity you get working with a multinational that you won't get all the time. Our kids are still young enough for us to be able to move them around. How do we feel about it? And as a family, we decided that it's an adventure worth having, because it's a great opportunity to work on in an incubation team, working for the Microsoft Cloud adoption program when it first came up. And these are the early days of adoption, George, when everybody in the industry thought adoption was adopting pets and kids. Technology and adoption words didn't really go together. So we were Microsoft's experiment to see if that would land with the industry. And so my job in Singapore was to go and work with a different customer every week, travel to a different country every week, work with leadership from different industries every week to talk to them how they would adopt new ways of working across the culture that they had within the organization, using Microsoft cloud technologies to disrupt the existing way of working and potentially bring in new productivity improvements across their people. So moving from Australia to Singapore was actually a big change. And my manager at the time, really supportive, got me in touch with some people in Singapore that I could work with to understand what the differences were. What was it like living in Singapore? Some of the main challenges around cost of housing and cost of education, and how you would transition between the countries. And having that local support on the other side was instrumental. And Microsoft helped with the relocation. So that was brilliant. But working out of Singapore was completely new and exciting. And I think changes like that, for me, really filled me with a lot of energy. And it gave us as a family a new perspective on how we work in a different cultural subcontext. And for our kids, it gave them experience and exposure to a new culture to live in. And so it was overall a really positive experience. We had always intended to go to Singapore for a limited time. And so 2 years later, we decided that it was time to come back, and we came back to Australia.
Oh, cool. So the goal really was just get that experience, then come back to Australia and live back in the, I guess, the culture that you've grown up in, that your kids have grown up in, right?
Yeah, and having gained those new perspectives from having lived in a different part of the world with a different way of thinking, whatever I can do to sort of expand my horizons will help me not only in business and working for a multinational company, but also helped me and people in my family grow as humans.
That's cool. I like that, man. It's good having you back in Australia, by the way. So take me through. I'm actually intrigued in, since you've come back from. I'm looking at some of the many different roles you've had at Microsoft, just to name a few, and I'm just going to go through your LinkedIn profile. So obviously you came back from Singapore, done a lot of change management. You were a fast track adoption program manager for those outside of Microsoft. That was a program that was part of the product group for a while. You did a lot, gone back to your change specialist in digital culture, customer success, change leader, the behavioral specialist, and specifically now when you moved into not just that, you went into modern work architect, and your current role, the co-pilot behavioral specialist. Just take me through sort of, is that similar in change management, or is it looking at the adoption aspect and changing people's behavior towards newer technologies?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of my time then honing my skills around people change management. And how do you help individuals want to change the way they do things? And then how do you scale that across an organization? So a number of the roles that I worked with were all around helping people change the way they work, the way they think. And I did that with customers, but I also had an opportunity to do that within Microsoft, where I was helping one of the major roles we have, a customer facing role called customer success account manager role. And I was making sure that they were able to change as their role evolved. So one of the things I really appreciated was that people need help in changing, and just telling them to change is not enough for them to want to adopt a new change and make those new habits sustainable. So spending some time in various different roles, collecting different perspectives on how you help people change, I found really valuable. And so when I eventually came to the product team as part of the fast track role, and now as the co-pilot behavioral specialist, these are both quite technical roles. And what I'm really enjoying about being a co-pilot behavioral specialist is that I get to talk to the Australian federal government about technology and the security and compliance aspect of it, and how the large language models work, and as a result, how the Microsoft ecosystem can help people be more productive. But I can then also talk to them about what it takes to help people want to make that change. Because as you're probably aware, generative AI is got a different level of acceptance within society. Some organizations really want to use generative AI to change the way they work, but a lot of people within society are not quite sure how it's going to impact. As a result, a little bit uncertain, a little bit cautious, and Skynet is top of mind because James Cameron did a wonderful job in the Terminator
Good
movies.
movie. Yeah, very good
Yeah,
movie.
fantastic movies. And so there is this unconscious bias around how generative AI may not impact people in real life. And so a lot of my job is to walk senior leaders through what's real and what's an unconscious bias that limits us as humans. And so this is where I believe my studies, when I did a degree in psychology from Monash, really helped me understand from a human perspective how much of our thinking is psychological, but also how much of our behaviors are physiological, because we have a biology that controls a lot of our thinking and a lot of our behaviors. And so understanding the biological aspect of it helps you understand the human limitations when it comes to our physical setup. And so being able to understand that, you can actually talk to senior executives around how fight and flight works. You can talk to people about how unconscious bias works, because there are physical aspects of it. You can talk to how the amygdala is evoked during change and how our HPA axis works every time there's a threat response. So yeah, I really love my job today because I get to take all that learning in change management, all that learning in psychology, all my experience helping people land change, but also my passion for technology that started back at school, that I'm now investing into learning more about AI and the technical aspects of AI, and put it all together into enabling government think about making people and departments more effective.
Yeah, that's cool, mate. I like that. I like that you've actually. It's like it literally is a career of work. It's like
Yeah.
from your initial passion and the joy that you got from basic back in high school all the way through to your interest in change, people, and psychology. So let me got a couple more questions for you. I'll keep you. It's great that my light's gone and turned off, and I look sort of very, very sexy here with the dark side of my face. Take me through. I always talk about. I used to call it my philosophy, but it makes more sense when I say my values for my career are pretty simple. I talk about 3 values that I follow. I love helping people, so everything I do has to have some sort of aspect of helping others. I need a purpose in what I do, and I need some sort of passion in what I do day to day. Take me through, and I think you've sort of answered them, but take me through what your career values are and what you feel like they've been throughout your career.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, George. So I guess I never really thought about them earlier in my career. Right? So early in my career, I just wanted to do a great job. But then I realized that it wasn't about me doing a great job. It was about how do we help a group of people that are working on more complex problems to do a great job. And so it's about moving from a me focus to a us focused. And then while I was working at Microsoft a few years ago, I got to do a high performance mindset course. And in that, I took some time to pause and really think about my purpose as a human. And I'll read out the statement that I came up with, and perhaps people that are watching this episode may connect, and maybe this will inspire you to find your own statement. What I came up with was to enable people to find their purpose, discover their niche, to make the world a better place while demonstrating the values of commitment, humility, and continuous learning. So that continuous learning became a really important part of me. And so in December, I've just finished my MBA, specializing in change management, which was another few years of learning. And that's my 4th university degree. And I've promised my family that there are no more degrees coming. And so when it comes to my principles, there are 4 principles that I live by when I'm at work every day. The first one is stay grounded. And that's about knowing that I work to live. I don't live to work. And that the most important thing in my life is not work. It's my family and my friends. And that they always, always take priority. And if that means that I've got to drop my work because one of the kids is not well and I've got to go and pick them up from school and then spend the day with them, then I have no hesitation in doing that. And so to be able to do that, what I'll need to make sure is that I've got the right support system around me at work. So I've got somebody at work that I've talked to who's able to back me up when I need to be away at short notice, that my manager understands what my priorities are, and they also support that I don't live to work. And so I'm able to now proactively set up that support system, knowing that my priority is always my family and my friends. The second principle is self-care and recovery. I've got to look after myself so I can look after other people that I work with at work. And that means that I've got to take breaks from work so I can regenerate. And I want to make sure that I'm spending that time with my family, regenerating and recouping my energy so that I can come back to work and then be my best self. But also at work, I've got to take care of myself so I have space to take care of others. And so that's a principle that I've found quite challenging to put in place in my early career because I was the yes person. And I said yes to everything. And that means I had so much on my plate that I could never deliver anything well. Whereas as I've grown up in my career, I've learned that saying no is sometimes the best thing you can do, not only for yourself, but by extension to others around you. So yeah, my second principle is self-care and recovery. My third principle is the learn it all mindset. I'm very happy to acknowledge when I don't know things. And then I put a plan in place on how do I learn it? Or how do I leverage somebody who already knows this? Because I don't need to know everything all the time. Sometimes I just need to know people who know things and I can leverage their experience. But then things that I need to know, I need to put in time and effort to ensure that I learn it. So every week I have a 2-hour block in my calendar, which is to learn things that week. And I will not compromise that 2-hour block for anything else. And that's why I continued my university studies even into my 40s, right? Because there is a fantastic opportunity to take what you have learned the day before and next day in your work, put it in practice and see what works and see what fails and learn from that failure and celebrate that failure and fail fast so you can learn quickly and then move on. So that learn it all mindset is something that I'm really, really enjoying. And then the last one is diversity, inclusion, and community. And so for me, it's all about diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, and being able to learn from a diverse group of people that I surround myself with. So I need to be intentionally in control of people that I surround myself with and who I talk to and who I spend time with. Because every person that I spend time with is an opportunity to learn. And so one of the reasons why I'm still 12 years on, still at Microsoft, is that in every meeting that I attend, I'm not the smartest person. I'm actually looking to attend cohorts where I'm often the person with the least knowledge, because that means I have an opportunity to learn from everyone in that group. And so I'm always surrounding myself with people with diverse ideas. So I don't get into that group think mentality, that I'm always being challenged respectfully and I'm giving people that respect in return. So, George, just to summarize those four principles: staying grounded, self care and recovery, a learn it all mindset, and then diversity, inclusion, and a sense of community.
Very good. Four very good principles there, mate. Can see that in a lot of what we talked about today. It's very much part of it. Okay, let me go through a couple more questions with you. Give me a highlight of your career and a low light of your career, and then we'll go on to the last question.
One of the highlights of my career was a keynote presentation that I got to do for the Australian Cybersecurity Council at the Australian Cybersecurity Annual Conference. We got, I think, a 24-hour notice for that because the keynote speaker had something else that came up. And so they approached me and one of my really good friends, Jimmy Fitzsimmons.
Hi, Jimmy.
And we were working on a cybersecurity project and the people aspect of taking people on a security journey at that time. And we literally had a few hours notice to put together a keynote presentation. And so the fact that we were trusted to do a keynote presentation at such short notice for such an important conference was definitely one of the highlights of my career. Since then, I've gone and presented at a number of conferences around the world, including the Microsoft Ignite conference at Orlando. And one of the conferences we did during COVID online, I think had something like 8,000 attendees. So really enjoyed presenting. But yeah, that was definitely a highlight of my career. A low light. Oh, I don't know if I can talk about low lights publicly, George.
That's fine. You don't need to.
But one thing that I have learned is when you surround yourself with smart people, you've got to respect their smartness, which means if you don't know something, let people know that you don't know something and that you need help. I have found myself in situations in the past where I have been too proud to admit that I don't know something, and I've committed to delivering something that I had no ability to do so. And I was too proud to admit it. And that not only gets you in a difficult situation, but that also puts you in people that trust you in a difficult situation. And so, yeah, I think surround yourself with smart people and then trust them to help you get the work done is what I probably learned from my low light in my career.
So always learning. It's always learning, right? Anytime we make a mistake, it's a good outcome to bring up. All right, so give me the go back to the young Rishi who's just doesn't quite know what to do with his life, maybe playing computer games back, whatever it was, whatever version of computer games were when you were a kid. What advice would you give young Rishi or someone who is of a similar age or upcoming in their career today and thinking about stuff, maybe I want to be like Rishi in the future? What advice would you give them?
So George, at school, I was playing Doom and Duke Nukem. I don't know if you remember Duke Nukem.
I played them both. I love Duke Nukem. That was a great game.
So that's what I was playing during school, and then got onto the Game Boy console and then the Sega console as well at the time, playing Sonic the Hedgehog. School days, if somebody is watching this and you're still at school, I'd say, at least in the technology industry, the learn it all mindset is going to be your friend. And so start molding yourself in that philosophy where everything is an opportunity to learn. A failure is not a personal attack. Or don't take it as a personal attack, even though other people mean it that way. You have a choice on how you accept it. But take it as an opportunity to learn. School is your learning age. And experiment with lots of different aspects of the technology industry. I guess my advice to when I was at university would be slightly different. It would be to go deep and learn the ins and outs of the technology industry. Explore a lot, but explore in depth. So while at school, I would encourage people to go broad. When you start preparing for your career, start going deep and start to work out what you want to be a master at. But that doesn't mean you can't change or to be a master at something else. But find something that you're truly passionate about and become as good an expert as you can be in that technology, knowing that it will change, especially in this era of generative AI, where, as you and I both know, George, the technology is changing by the hour, and we are having to keep up with the changes in the industry. The other thing that I would keep in mind is keep your options open, because the technology industry is such a vast industry that you may have started in one part of it, like I did as a software engineer, but today I'm working with senior leaders, giving them guidance on how they can use technology to fundamentally transform the culture of the agency. That's something that I didn't even know existed when I was at school or at university, or when I got my first job. So my advice would be to follow your passion, to follow the industry's trends, to see what sparks your interest, and go and work in roles that you find uncomfortable, because that's where you will learn the most.
Very good point, mate. Awesome, Rishi. Thank you very much, mate. That's actually really, really good. It's really interesting hearing your insights and how you've sort of guided your career over a period of time. I was like, you think you know somebody, and then you talk, and then you interview them about their career. So thanks for joining us, mate. We really appreciated having you. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. See ya.
Thank you, George. Catch you later. Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate. Bye. Thank you for watching this episode of Simpa Says. If you would like to see more videos, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Or follow if you are listening on a podcast platform to support the channel and join our community.